Okay. Evening, everyone. Welcome. Good to see you again. Well, I kind of seeing you, it's a bit... Hopefully by the end of this week, we should be sorted with our lights, in the sense that we've got an electrician that's set us up in the church so far, so that we connect the generator to the distribution board. Which means all the plugs and lights in the church would then operate once we switch the generator on. So even if the lights go off, at least we'll still be in operation as well. So getting there. But I guess the topic deals with a kind of a journeying inside, and it can get a bit dark down there. So it's not a bad place to start. Let us pray. No, thank you again for the gift that you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ. And the opportunity that you afford us to follow you. Thank you that you come alongside us during this Lenten period. As much as parts of us want to say to you, Lord, can you just remove certain things? You are asking of us to journey through it. And so as you bring to the fore and to the surface, as you ask of us to go deeper, help us to see that you are holding us by the hand. Help us to see the things that you are revealing to us, Lord. Even those things that can be very painful. And so the reminder that the journey towards resurrection is through the cross, is through the tomb, towards new life. And so thank you for everyone here. Thank you for the journey that we are not doing only individually, but as a community. As we find ourselves in different stages of our own spiritual journey and our relationship with you, Lord. Help us to be patient with ourselves and with one another. In Jesus' name. Amen. Warm welcome to all those joining us, and those joining us via the live stream as well. And so we've immediately jump into week 2, which is running on empty. I've touched on that a bit over Sunday and today in the services, but we'll go a bit deeper in that. But before I get there, I thought maybe you've had some things that's been sitting with you this past week, whatever it is, whether it's a question, whether it's clarification, whether it's a comment you maybe want to make from last week. Anyone? Observation? Sorry, just for those on live stream.
I'm still looking for a term, just a one-word term that says codependency, and like battle. There's long explanations, but there's nothing nice and short, and there's no synonym for it, unless someone's got one for me.
Noted, thank you. I think I saw a hand that side.
I also went home last week and met Dennis at our garages, and I think we both just and had the feeling, was it going to be a very heavy course? It just seemed so deep, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this for 6 weeks. However, reading week 1 again, and then reading week 2, and I read it again this afternoon, a lot of it became lighter in a way to me. But last week I did go home in the dark thinking, I don't know if this is not too, maybe I'm too old. It's too deep for me.
So you're thinking we're drowning a bit? Yeah? Because of the depth of it? But I hear what you're saying. I mean, we're going into a space that the depth is not necessarily the information, but where we're going. The experience of where we're going, that can be, yeah, the word resistance, possibly. We all have that in us, so yeah. Okay. Anyone else? I know there was an observation made, if you look at that list, the checklist, and you might think to yourself, okay, there's a lot of things wrong with me as you're ticking it. Now, the aim of it is not to look at yourself through the lenses of right and wrong. Okay, not being judging towards yourself, but noticing what are certain traits. Yet certain of those traits could have been stronger in your life when you were younger. So for example, the aspect of controlling and perfectionism could have been at a heightened level in your place of work and wherever else. But as one matures and as one goes through experiences, and as one goes through our own healing process in its different ways, certain things, so if you look at it on a percentage scale, you might then say, okay, 10 years ago I was bad. But I look at myself now and think maybe I'm not as bad as what I used to be. So maybe not 100% on the scale I'm now, but 40%, 50%. So I'm just saying we don't have to be that hard on ourselves as well, but yet honest enough. It's finding that balance, yeah. Okay, so maybe 10 years ago you might have ticked more compared to now, where you might be ticking less. But there might still be certain of those qualities in those areas that we haven't ticked that doesn't really stand out as much as what certain ones do. Does that make sense? Okay, so notice that. As long as we're noticing these things, seeing it, identifying it. Yes, the journey is not just about identifying, it's also a journey of change. Because we can notice it, label it, and still do nothing about it as well. Okay. Can we get the slide up, please? Okay, can you move on? Okay, so week 2 running on empty. Next slide. Okay, for those who's able to see, John 3, verse 1 to 16, which is our Sunday reading, gospel reading. Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night and said, "Rabbi, we know you are a teacher who has come from God. For no one could perform the miraculous signs you are doing if God were not with him." In reply, Jesus declared, "I tell you the truth, unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." "Well, how can a man be born when he is old?" Nicodemus asked. "Surely he cannot enter a second time in his mother's womb to be born?" And Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth, unless a man is born of water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but spirit gives birth to spirit. You should not be surprised at my saying, 'You must be born again.' The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit." "And so how can this be?" Nicodemus asked. "You are Israel's teacher," said Jesus, "and do you not understand these things? I tell you the truth, we speak of what we know and we testify of what we've seen, but still you people do not accept our testimony. I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. How then, when you believe if I speak of heavenly things, will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? No one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man. And just as Moses lifted up the snake in the desert, the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life." For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Here ends the reading. You must be born again. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it's come from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. Sorry, Liz, you were saying maybe I'm old. You were making, you were using that, and he says, let's get to that part there. How can a man be born when he is old? Verse 4. How can a person be born again when he is old? So it's got nothing to do with age here. It's got nothing to do with age. Being born again, being renewed by God's Spirit, has got everything to do with God. And so over the years, I think one has been taught that if you want to commit your life to God, there's the sinner's prayer. And so you do this, and then you become a member of the family of God. Yet it says there, the wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. The wind blows wherever it wishes. God's Spirit moves among us and through us, not because of what we do, but because of what God wants to do. And so there are stages in our life that God's Spirit just blows through us and upon us. And maybe these are the stages, that one of those stages now in our life. And this journey of heaviness and the depth in which we're going. And then God just lifts it again for a moment for us to cope. And then he'll do it again. And so there's questions at the end of these, this lesson, but it highlights the whole area of Nicodemus. And here's this old man coming with a desire. There's something in him. There's a void in him that's saying there must be more to life than this. There must be more to life than this. And I'm sure we've gone through life in that. We might be sitting here tonight and saying, there must be more. There has to be more than what I'm currently just doing on a daily basis. And so Nicodemus says, what must I do? And then Jesus says, the wind blows wherever it wishes. What must I do? There's nothing you can do. The wind blows wherever it wishes. Notice the wind. Respond to the wind. Respond to God's Spirit. You'll find the doing in that. Let's go back to the slides. And so just to highlight again, so what is codependency? Sorry, Dennis, I don't have a word yet for you, but we'll work on that. Codependency is living the myth that you can make yourself happy by trying to control people and events outside of yourself. A sense of control, or lack of it, is central to everything you do and think. Next one. And so today a description of adult children in dysfunctional families, and this is by a book by John and Linda Friel. And what do they say? They say, something happened to us a long time ago. It happened more than once. It hurt us. We protected ourselves the only way we knew how. We are still protecting ourselves. It isn't working anymore. Just think through that for a moment. If the operating system in which as a child you adapted for yourself to keep yourself sane in whatever you were experiencing. And if that operating system is still the system with which we operate today, but in a different, broader way, but the threat hasn't been with us for such a long time now. The struggle is that we need to control our environment. That's what they're saying. We're still operating in that system. I'll give you through this process, I'll give you an example. So me growing up, going through the whole area of codependency, separation in the home, part of my role is to keep the peace. That's my understanding. Keep the peace. But what I do well, and that's where I stand, put me in a crisis situation, I'll immediately try to assess what needs to be done. So when it comes to crisis, I'm there. Put me in a calm situation, you kind of say, what do I really have to do? There's nothing for me to do. And so it's as if, what do I do? You create crisis situations for you to then respond. So what am I good at? I'm very good at procrastinating. So I'll wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait until you get to the last moment, because what's it created? What have I just created? I've created a crisis moment. It's not necessary. I know what I need to do. I know how to go about it. But I create my own crisis moment because my operating system says that's the best way you operate. But there's no crisis. But I've created it because that's, for me, the link. Does that make sense? So just notice how we operate in those ways as well. Next slide, please. And so running on empty. In the book, Love is a Choice, we each have within us a God-given hunger for love. In Love is a Choice, they refer to this hunger as a love tank. And so imagine a heart-shaped reservoir within us, and when you're a tiny baby, the love tank was empty. If your parents were both emotionally healthy people with full love tanks of their own, they spent a few decades filling your love tank from theirs. And this is the way God designed it to be. If there's a healthy family, so they're not taking from your tank, they are being filled, and they in turn are filling your tank. Okay, move on. And so you've seen the images of the love tanks that you have there. Mom and dad, and the child. And so what they're saying is that if your parents' love tank, one or two of them is empty, which means their parents, or those who needed to nurture them, did not fill it, what is it that they have to give to their children? What is it that they have to give? And they, in turn, what do they have to give to their children? And what happens? You pass it on from one generation to the next, to the next. Just for a minute, just a moment, just think about it. Think about your own parents. Because you can extend that heart. If you go further up, you can put grandparents. And what they went through. Each one has a story to tell. And even their stories you might not have. The further back you go, the more secrets you might uncover. And again, this is not to question who they were or what they'd done. Sometimes they had to do things because of the situation and the context. I'm not making the fact that abuse is right, not at all. But the context in terms of what they needed to do. And so they didn't pour their love into your tank because maybe they just didn't know, because they didn't receive that. So you can go further back in history as well. And so the question one wants to ask, if you don't receive love, will your love tank stay empty? If you don't receive love, will your love tank stay empty? Anyone? Yes? Why would you say yes? Okay. So there's nothing to put in. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. Mm. There has to be an intervention. And then part of this journey, for example, is an intervention. There has to be an intervention. The next slide. In response to that question, it says no, it won't be empty. Just like air fills up a space, so will something fill the tank. Something. And so if you think about codependency, you think about the checklists that you had last week, those are the things that begin to fill the tank. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. It could be one's interpretation of love as a parent. I can give you everything materially because I didn't have it, but I didn't have any emotional intimacy. So the touching and the hugging. And so my interpretation of love is to provide for you, make sure that you have everything. But there isn't a physical touch. There isn't words of affirmation. I could be so focused on work, I push you to make sure that you ensure that you work, to do the best that you do. And that's my interpretation of love. And so along that spectrum again, there comes a point where one kind of crosses the threshold where it becomes harmful and not actually encouraging and empowering. It actually moves into the harmful section in our relationship with others. Does that answer? Toxic love, yeah? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. What Penny says, sometimes you look to other people to fill your tank. And sometimes the selection of the people that you choose are not the appropriate people in terms of filling your tank. Sometimes it's easier to choose people that you can control than those you cannot control. Next slide, please. That's what they call, if you think of the cots, you would have this mobile, and sometimes you would hang it, you have it hanging from the ceiling or wherever else. Now for that mobile to be in balance, they have to ensure that the certain weight and everything obviously is equally distributed. If you touch any of the items on that mobile, what happens? Everything begins to move. So it's a system in itself. The one connected to the other. And so you pull on the one side, the other side, it affects the other side. But the mobile system is so designed that if you leave it, it falls back into the way it's been designed. In the same way, our family systems work like that, like a mobile system. That's our family system. And sometimes when our family system is out of sync, we try to fix the one side to ensure what? That it falls back into normal, whatever that family system thinks is normal. But when it's out of sync and the other one begins to pull away and becomes heavier, it's a strain on the family system as well. We'll talk a bit more about that now in terms of family systems. Because I think what we need to notice, what I'd like us to notice is the codependency is not done in isolation. It's not experienced in isolation. It's within the family system. It's not apart from it. It's within it. And so we've looked at what is codependency. Let's move on to the next slide. Unhealthy or a dysfunctional family system. So what I want to read to you is what an unhealthy family system could look like, as described by John and Linda Friel in their book called Adult Children, The Secrets of Dysfunctional Families. And so they say this: let's look at an example that hits closer to home. Let's make each piece of that mobile, remember the mobile we just saw now? Mobile, a member of a family instead of a piece of metal or wood or crystal. One piece is dad, who works very hard and also watches a lot of TV. Another piece is mom, who works a lot and worries about the kids. Another is the oldest son, who gets good grades and is a valedictorian of his high school. A fourth is middle sister, who is nice and quiet and praised for not being a bother. And lastly comes little brother, who is cute and sassy and funny. And so this mobile is in balance. It has a structure. It is a family, which is more than just a dad or a mom or a big brother, a middle sister or a little brother. And like all systems, if one member gets bumped, it affects all the members. And so when one member gets bumped, everyone unconsciously, without malice, tries to get him or her back into place. And so dad works and watches TV. Mom works and worries. It's very stereotypical, eh? Could be mom, but yeah, I'm just saying. Dad and mom don't take care of themselves. Dad and mom don't nurture their marriage. Oldest son works harder and harder to get good grades and be a star on the football field. Middle daughter works harder and harder to fit in, be nice, and not make waves. Younger son gets cuter and cuter. Dad and mom begin to feel empty in their marriage. They lose touch with each other. This creates stress. No one talks about it. And so the stress remains. Mom worries about the kids. Dad watches more TV. Older son wins more honors. Middle daughter gets nicer. Little brother picks up on the marital stress and gets drunk on his eighth grade friends, with his eighth grade friends. And so dad gets concerned. Mom worries a whole bunch. Older brother gets another A to make sure the family is doing okay in spite of the stress. Middle sister gets nicer, quieter, and tries to fit in more. And then little brother gets caught using drugs. And so the mobile has been bumped. Something is causing chaos. We know what it is. We can fix it. We are a system. We are a family. And so let's rally together, get closer, identify the problem, analyze it, troubleshoot it, discuss it, make a list of opinions, huddle around, come together, and lick this thing. And so little brother has a problem, and we won't leave him alone with it. We are going to help him. And so we do. We will seek counseling for little brother. And because we care, we agree to go to family counseling with little brother because that's what the counselor recommends. And so we go. The counselor tries to look at the whole family system. He or she starts to focus on mom and dad, and we wonder why. We just want little brother fixed. There's nothing wrong with anyone else in the family. Why? Just look at big brother. He's successful. Just look at middle sister. She's so nice. Look at how hardworking mom and dad are. No, it's just little brother. please fix him. But you see, it's not just little brother. We can't see that. And so we terminate the counseling to reduce our anxiety about having to look at ourselves. Little brother continues to act out. Eventually he becomes chemically dependent or truant enough or steals enough, and he must get some kind of inpatient treatment. And while there, he starts to feel better because someone is hearing him. Someone is asking him to be responsible for his own behavior without putting him in a dysfunctional system at the same time. Are we kind of joining the dots here? 30 days later, little brother is doing much better. He goes home. Everyone thinks that the problem is over. But they aren't. Because no one else in the system has done any work on the problem. On their problem, at least. And so dad and mom haven't looked at their shaky marriage. Big brother hasn't looked at what a burden it is to have to be a star at the same time. And middle sister hasn't looked at the huge toll she is paying for being nice all the time. So more than likely, the system will return to its original state. And in this case, it means that little brother will continue to provide his service to the family, which is to act out its pain so that no one else in the system has to admit that there's anything wrong. I find that just so amazing, enlightening. In one way, that as if the little brother is the one that actually holds the pain of everyone and acting it out, whereas the others are not. And so he goes on to say, this happens all the time unless the whole family eventually gets help. And so if the whole family still resists getting involved in treatment, the therapist will recommend that the little brother stays away from the family as much as possible, and that he develops a new family system to replace the old dysfunctional one. It's not saying don't live with your family anymore. They're saying find another system of therapy that can help you. The 12-step program and all of those kind of things. Because the one that you're currently in, it's not helping you. I think for a moment just notice that's the unhealthy family. That's the dysfunctional family. So what's the healthy family system then? Well, I guess the opposite, is it not? Well, the obvious question now is what happens to a healthy family system? A healthy system experiences stress and problems too. Mental health does not mean the absence of problems. Far from it. Mental health means the ability to handle problems in a healthy way. A healthy family system is like a mobile too. But the rules and boundaries and the roles and connections between family members are different. In the example given above, dad and mom in the healthy family system would probably sit down one day and say to each other, you know, I've been feeling overworked and kind of stressed and distant from you for the past few weeks. I don't like it. In fact, it scares me a little. I don't like what's happening to us and our family. I think we need to make some changes. Now there's a recognition, and how many of us have had those kind of recognitions? You see it. Have you spoken about it? And then have you done something about it? That's the difference in terms of the healthy and the dysfunctional family. Well, dad might say, yes, I've been in a rut lately, work, and then I just sit in front of the tube all night. There's an acknowledgement. And dad's not saying, I'm sitting in front of the TV because you're not paying attention to me. There's an acknowledgement. Taking ownership. Mom says, I spend too much time worrying about the kids, but doing nothing about it. And so they decide to change some things in their marriage. They spend more time together without the television. They share some of the homework or the housework. Then they talk to the kids about the changes they've been making and ask the kids how they are doing. So they don't make the changes and say, you shall just follow. If they're small, obviously they don't have much of a choice. But as they grow a bit older, you involve them in the decision making. And then they talk to the kids about it. And because they've already recognized and admitted their own stresses and have then done something to change the situation, they are giving a powerful, clear, healthy message to the kids that change is okay. And so admitting problems is okay, and coming up with solutions is okay. Preaching and demanding is not necessary here. Okay. Can we see the contrast between the two, the dysfunctional and the unhealthy family versus the healthy family? So what would the children say? Well, the older brother could say, I've been working too hard. It's fun to be successful, but I need more time to socialize. Middle sister says, my friends all say I'm nice. I'm tired of being nice because they all take advantage of me. It makes me angry. I think being nice all the time is not good for me. Little brother is then free to say something like, I'm tired of everyone treating me like a toy. I'm little, but I'm not a toy. So the expression of what one is feeling and going through in a healthy family versus an unhealthy family. Are you able to do that? I'm just putting the question, I'm not asking you to respond. But are we able to do that in our own context, in our homes, without worrying, hey, what's the other person going to say? As long as what you're expressing is what you are owning, I think that's important. Because if you begin to start blaming the other, what's going to happen? The blame is just going to come back again. It's owning that process. Next slide, please. So that what we see there is the healthy families and the unhealthy family system. Next one. And so in healthy family systems, according to John and Linda Friel, they provide safety, warmth, nurturance, love, and belongingness to its members. There's autonomy and the separateness in the sense of also being individual, that you can do things that you enjoy doing as well. Promote self-esteem or a sense of self-worth in each family member. Families get to make mistakes, and that's important, eh? And how we respond to those mistakes that the family makes. Family gets to have fun. We need to have fun. Because out of the fun comes creativity, and the juices begin to flow. And families have a spirituality. They know who God is. They understand who God is as a family. Whereas with love is a choice, they also add to that. Next slide, please. Healthy family system, they're sane. I guess we still have to look for that families, eh? They're sane, there's balanced parents, there's no depression, no mental illness, no extreme frustration with either life in general or some element of it. If depression was part of their past, they've dealt with it adequately. No addicted parents, mature parents, self-sufficient, able to deal with life. Parents with a positive, comfortable self-image. Parents who can relate appropriately to God in the best case scenario. God is central to the family structure. Parents who are committed to maintaining a happy marriage, and persons with a low level of codependency come from such families and build healthy families of their own. I don't think those perfect families are just there. I think more and more they've come from some kind of codependent situation, and they've worked their way through it towards the healthy state. Some are nurtured in terms of healthy families, but I think more and more today you'd find that people come from codependent, work their ways to. The next slide looks at unhealthy. In dysfunctional families, there's the doer. Who's the doer in the family? Yeah. Sorry? Often the mother. What do they say about the doer here? The doer does a lot of things. The doer provides most or all of the maintenance functions of the family. The doer makes sure kids are dressed and fed. The doer pays the bills, irons the shirts, cooks the dinner, takes the kids to wherever they need to be. The doer does a lot. But it is a dysfunctional family. But because it is a dysfunctional family, that's all about the doer and what the doer has time for. And so the doer feels tired, lonely, taken advantage of, neglected and empty. But the doer gets a lot of satisfaction out of being so accomplished at his or her tasks. And the family encourages the doer either directly or indirectly. And the doer's own unhealthy guilt and overdeveloped sense of responsibility keeps him or her going. Does that make sense? Anyone can relate to that? You got some doers here? You don't have to put up your hand, it's okay, don't worry. Then there's the enabler, the helper, the lover, all in one heading. The enabler provides all of the nurturance and the sense of belongingness in the family. Sometimes this person is also the doer, and sometimes not. And so for the enabler, the helper, the lover, keeping everyone together, preserving the family unit at any cost, including physical violence and even death. I guess that's kind of threatening people more than anything else. And trying to smooth out ruffled feathers and avoid conflict is the ultimate goal. Fear and abandonment and fear that other family members cannot stand on their own 2 feet are what often motivates this role. Just notice here if you find yourself as that enabler or lover or helper. The second one says the lost child or loner. The lost child deals with the family dysfunctions by means of escape. But actually, in a sense, the child or parent is taking care of the family's needs for separateness and autonomy. And so this is the child who stays in her room or his room a lot, or is the one who is out in the woods playing by themselves. He or she is alone, but it's not a healthy aloneness. It's a deep loneliness that pervades those who have this role. I can identify with that when I was younger. Just need to just be away, just to escape. Then the hero. The hero provides self-esteem for the family. He or she goes to law school, becomes an international known attorney, but secretly feels awful because he or she has a sister in a mental hospital and a brother who has died of alcoholism. But he or she carries the family banner for all the public to see. He or she makes the family proud, but at a terrible price in terms of their own well-being. Are you a hero? The mascot, often the younger children. The mascot provides humor and comic relief for the family. He or she gives the family a sense of fun or playfulness, of silliness and distorted type of joy. The cost of the mascot is that his or her true feelings of pain and isolation never get expressed. And he or she remains an emotional cripple until he or she gets into a recovery program of their own. Any mascots here? The scapegoat. The scapegoat gets to act all of the family's dysfunction and therefore takes the blame and the heat of the family. Soos hulle sê, die swart skaap in die familie. He or she gets drug addicted or steals, is a black sheep, gets in a lot of fights, acts out sexually. And then the family then gets to say, if little brother weren't such a delinquent, we'd be a healthy family. The cost to the scapegoat is obvious. And then there's dad, little princess, mommy's little man, or vice versa. And so this role, as we will discuss later, is a severe form of emotional abuse, is what they say, which many professionals call emotional or covert incest. And so this role feels too good to a child who gets to be a little spouse to one of the parents in the system. This child does not get to be a child, though, and is actually seduced into the role by a parent who is too afraid or too dysfunctional to get his or her needs met by another adult. Those of us who were given this role usually wind up getting physically or emotionally abused by others in our adult relationships because our boundaries were never respected when we were little. And then lastly, the saint, I don't know why they must use the word priest also in there. The saint, the priest, the nun, the rabbi. And so this is the child who expresses the family spirituality and is expected to become a priest, a nun, a rabbi, or a monk, and not to be sexual. Often the expectation is never a spoken one, it is implied and subtly reinforced and encouraged. And so this child is unconsciously molded into believing that he or she will only have worth if they act out the spirituality for the family. And if they don't, they will have little or no worth. And it's not necessarily saying that that's what the family is saying, but that's how the person will interpret it to be. Are you able to identify yourself in some of those roles? What do they say in regards to this? Just next slide. It's okay. Move on to the next one. That's just love is a choice. Dysfunctional families, which is very much similar. Next slide. What they're saying in regard to this is to be able to differentiate. In healthy families, there isn't roles, there are boundaries, and everyone understands the system within which they work. In dysfunctional families, people take on a role or are given a role, and that's the role you play for most of your life. That's the difference. There was a point in my life where it wasn't too long ago, I guess as a priest, I thought to myself, I'm so tired of being nice, man. He's a nice guy, eh? He's a nice guy. Oh, you're so nice. You get to a point and think, I'm just tired of being nice. But I understand, you just get to a point of interpreting, eventually, is this your role? Yeah. And yet you are so much more than just the role that you've allocated yourself and what others through their forming have shaped you into. And so that's why sometimes there's a struggle, because you're trying to break free from the role. And so that takes us to this next level. So how do you begin to break into these areas of one's life? That's the cake, the 4-level cake. Identify the symptoms. What are the symptoms? That's your first layer. Your second layer is relationships, the ones that you relate with and how you relate with them. The third layer is the area of abuse. And the fourth one is love hunger. Just move on to the next slide. Just unpack that. And so I'm going to ask you just briefly, just to think through this. I'm mindful of the fact that this is very personal. And so some of these things you might not want to share with someone. So let me just gauge from us here. Would you be okay if you want to talk with someone around some of these questions? Or would you prefer just reflecting on it? I'm asking your permission. I don't want to force it, because some might not feel comfortable in wanting to share some of these things. You okay? We okay with it? With someone, yes. With someone. Okay. No, not with the whole group, just with one person or two people around you. So I'm going to ask you just for a couple of minutes. Find someone next to you and decide if you want to respond to it or not. Here's the first question. Identify one or more symptoms of codependency that are visible in your life right now. Okay? Share that with someone. If you know the person, you could probably tell them what it is, but yeah. Just find someone and share that with them. Okay, next slide, Tembi. Okay, so layer one was noticing what are the symptoms. Okay, that's layer one. So now we look at layer two, just briefly. Layer two, think about your close relationships. What are the repeated patterns in your major relationships? What are the repeated patterns? Now you've identified one or two of those symptoms. What are the repeated patterns in that relationship? So for instance, I feel that I'm always trying to prove my worth to others, and I repeated feeling abandoned by others. What are the repeated patterns in all your major relationships? For example, if you don't get your way, what is the repeated pattern in a relationship? If people don't listen to you, what is your repeated pattern? Do you go quiet when you're supposed to express yourself? What are the repeated patterns? Next layer, Tembi. Okay. Now this obviously could get a bit more personal, and you can decide if you want to share, depending on what it is. So now we're going deeper, and now we're getting to layer 3. So we've gone to symptom, and how that symptom, how we use that symptom in our relationships, how the relationships are affected by the symptoms. So the first two kind of deals with the relationship and the symptom. The third one is beginning to deal with the cause of the symptoms. Yeah, the pattern, what causes the pattern. And so what layer 3 is, what kind of abuse did you experience in your childhood? For instance, my mother screamed at me all the time. I was terrified by my father's behavior when he was drunk. And so can you notice how this abuse relates to the symptoms in layer 1? For instance, during my childhood, my mother always criticized me, and now I try like crazy to please everyone else. Okay. Is there a connection that you can make between what you shared in terms of symptom with layer 3? Is there a connection you can make? And layer 4, Temi? Still within the group? Within your partner that you're speaking with, rate the residual love hunger. So layer 4 is this desire, this hunger for love. And so rate the residual love hunger from your childhood experiences on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being very empty love tank, and 10 being a full love tank. And so with someone, I would rate my childhood love tank, just decide whichever one fits for you. And then are you beginning to see how your current symptoms of codependency have roots in your childhood? What number would you give yourself? I'm not asking about your childhood love tank, eh? I'm talking about now. What's now? So it's from your childhood experiences, but you're not thinking what was your number of your tank then. You're asking, out of your childhood experience, what's the number of your tank now? Okay. Okay. So I think the first two layers might be a bit easier in terms of identifying the checklist, identifying where we find ourselves. If you struggle with that, ask someone who's close to you to help you with that, because they see things in us that we sometimes don't see as well, so that blind spot area. So that would be helpful. Now, don't go and criticize them after you've asked them to share with you what they've seen. And then noticing that in the relationship with them and your family. Okay, if you cannot really see it, ask them to identify that. And children generally are very honest and open about it. They'll be very forthright with you. And might be hurt by it. And realize that, is that how you view me? But yeah. Raz, you want to say something?
Thank you. We each had a copy of that leaflet you gave us. And I sat with mine and I said, I'm going to rate Noel, how I saw him. And then I kept the piece of paper, he didn't see it, and then I called out the headings and he had to say yes or no to them. And he had 3 of those things on and I had 2 out of the 3. So I said, gee, I know you really well, that's fantastic. Then he did mine. And then I didn't see what they were. And then he called the headings out and I said yes or no. And I looked at it and I was horrified. He had 8 things on there. And I had 3. So I said to him, well, either I know you really well, and you don't know me, which I really thought we know each other a lot, because we have a coffee date every single week. We love good coffee, and to discuss things. So we've, know each other pretty well. Well, we then looked at this, and I said, well, maybe I'm not seeing things that I should be seeing. And maybe I have ticked off things how I would like maybe to be. And it's given me food for thought.
Thank you for sharing. We do marriage counseling as well. After you've done the checklist with your spouse. The first 2, I think we find ourselves, the first 2 layers, generally we find ourselves in a fix-it mode. We're always thinking about, okay, how can I fix this? Identify the symptom, I know what it is, I'll fix it. And so in the relationship with others, when you've noticed that in terms of sharing, you then begin to try to fix the relationship. Okay, I won't do that again. And maybe I won't do it for a day, or 2, or a week, or a month, but something triggers it again, and then back to the same way again. And so the invitation of this journey is not to fix it. I'm not asking us to fix it. And that's very difficult if your codependency is to fix things. But to allow the Spirit to move as we go into the next level, which is the 3rd level, which gets us to the root, to one of the areas of the root. Because the thing about that is, you can't fix that. It's in the past. You can't go there literally and fix it. What it does do, it will bring up the emotion of that event or events that you've experienced. And begin to experience healing through that. You need to have the pain first. that emotion again, and then the healing. So that's the invitation of the journey as we continue. But what prevents us from going to the third level? Our symptoms, is what they say here, are born out of emotional denial. Our symptoms are born out of emotional denial. And they serve to maintain that denial. And so they are always that we allow ourselves to live one kind of life while convincing ourselves that we have a very different kind of life. And while they serve to give us the illusion that we are in control, they are in fact clear indicators that we have really done, what we have really done is to give up healthy control of our lives to something outside of our control. For example, by becoming trapped in addiction or phobia, we actually trade true control over our lives for the illusion of control. I think I can control food. Meanwhile, the food's controlling me. It is this illusion of control that makes giving up our symptoms so frightening, he says. And so all of our symptoms started out as a normal response to some perceived life stress. And it becomes a breeding ground for them when introduced in childhood. When we were learning how to live with other people, when those family systems in which we grew up had some kind of dysfunction, whether it is obvious, as it was in some of our cases, or subtle. For some it's normal, logical and reasonable for a child in that family to protect himself or herself. Just as the physical body will isolate an infection and protect the rest of the body by creating a cyst around it if it is left untreated for too long. And so our childhood minds will isolate the source of psychological pain in a safe blanket of denial to maintain some kind of balance. Does that make sense? That some of the third level experiences has some kind of safety net or blanket around it. And so what we have to do is first untie the safety blanket, because we just don't know what's there. Or we do know, but we're a bit afraid to experience that. And so these symptoms form as a way of protecting us from the pain that we as children had no power to remove. And so from early beginnings of denial, grows a pattern of splitting ourselves in two. Showing on one side we're competent, highly achieving on the outside, and frightened and hurt and lost on the inside. The longer this dysfunction goes untreated, the more adept we become at denying our true feelings. The more we deny our feelings, the worse we feel, what they're saying. And so our symptoms are also about our feelings. When we shut it off, the hurt and the fear, we then bask in the praise of outsiders, he says, who can only see the public image that we present. We take pride in being a strong one, or the rebel, or the cutie pie, and all the while dying inside because we feel that no one really knows who we are. And they probably don't. And so what are some of the symptoms out of that? Intimacy is a struggle. And relationship disorders. And so by supporting our denial and by helping us to maintain our family secrets, they also keep us from ever getting close to anyone else in healthy ways. You can be in a marriage for a very long time and still experience exactly what they're saying here. And it's not because of your partner, but because of something way before our partners. And it's not that one is being false to the other. You've just had to protect yourself. It takes us back to what? That system of operation. So how do you begin to break and dismantle that? And so I want to end off with a story. I know there's been lots of words and lots of speaking, but I want to end off with a story. And the story is that of one of the cases that in love is a choice. And so this is the case of Beryl Mason. I don't know, some of us might be able to relate to her story. And so Beryl Mason came into the clinic, her life in pieces. And just looking at her, you wouldn't dream that her life was anything short of spectacular. For she was a popular actress, a face known to many millions around the world. She was one of the very few persons on earth who might claim, rightly, I have it all. Yet celebrities are people neither more or less human than we are. And so the woman who entered our office lounge had put aside the special stage presence that separates the well-known from the unknown. The elegance remained, though, that natural grace which the very attractive exhibit without trying. She had deliberately shed both glamour and makeup to stand before us, a tortured, weary, and miserable lady. She was past the fresh bloom of youth and happiness, had so far eluded her. In life, if life would offer no more than material abundance, it was not worth living. And so now here she sat in our most comfortable interview room. Her overstuffed chair whispered, "Get comfortable and let rip," and nervously puffing a foreign cigarette in a holder long enough to shoot pool with. She laid out that sad litany of her life. My first husband, what a cad. I don't know, what does cad mean? Okay. Dr. Meyer, he looked so good on the outside. This is she speaking to the doctor. In private, he was a vicious, wife-beating thug. My second was considered the catch of Hollywood, some catch, a shark in an Italian suit. Paul Meyer settled back and folded his hands. All 5 husbands were like that. Attractive on the outside and rotten in private. All 5, the filth, what a piece of work, the worst of the lot. He was attentive at first without smothering. Know what I mean? Treated me really well. 2 months into the marriage, it was like he turned a page inside his head and started a new chapter. Booze, coke, grass, the whole enchilada. Knocked me around when he was half-tanked and in a stupor the rest of the time. And so now you are weary of all men, they ask her. Yes and no. It's crazy, I keep getting burned. But it's like I can't help myself. I keep sticking my stupid hand back in the fire. You'd think that after 2 or 3 disasters I'd learn, all I want is nice, normal man who cares about me. Is that too much to ask? And you're certain you can't be happy unless you're married? She thought for a moment, no, that's not it. I don't need a good man. I want a good man. So I'm not a flaming feminist. Is that so bad? Well, it's a good attitude. Have you had any other problems where you can't help yourself? And then she shares some of those other problems in terms of her area of work and the struggles with booze and tranquilizers. And there was no holding back now. And so during the next hour, she told Dr. Meyer everything she could about the cross stars of her life. Not even her soggy, rumpled little Sharpei would obey the way she wanted. She trotted out of symptom after classic symptom. Her life was a vividly colored magnification of the codependency problems many of us encounter. And so during a lull, as she was lighting up again, Paul took a wild shot, and he was pretty sure would hit close to center. So when did your father sexually abuse you? Early teens? You should have seen her eyes go wide and the mouth drop open. She snapped from eager cooperation to livid rage. I've never told a soul about that my whole life. Never. Not even Mom. How could you suggest such a thing? And out she stormed. She had not blotted it from memory, but she'd been denying it for years. She'd kept the dirty secret totally swept under that mat. No one knew. No one except her memory. And so what really happened to Beryl Mason? The relationships in her family of origin always had been rocky. She and her siblings did not get the loving attention they needed. And during the actual period of abuse, when her love tank should have been receiving nurturing from her father, the valve was tightly closed. Pain, humiliation, guilt, betrayal, all that and more had blocked off the flow and poisoned her own tank. Beryl lost that part of her childhood as literally as if those important years had been cut out of her lifetime with sub-cosmic knife. And so her love hunger, the bottom layer of the cake, had not been met. Her tank was empty. And the abuses of the third layer guaranteed that the top two layers would not sit straight. And so she then just left in a huff. And so can a person like Beryl be helped? And so yes, it can be done. But the process is immensely painful. And then why do it? If suffering results and the cure feels worse than the disease. And so in Beryl's case, as in one of the other couple's case, without intervention and help, life would never get better. It won't get better. It would deteriorate further and further. And so the misery becoming even more wrenching. The wounds of the past continue festering. The warping effect of codependency keeps us from seeing reality clearly. We make the same errors, the same mistakes over and over, all the while believing what we think we see and not what is. Beryl went through 5 episodes of marriage before it dawned upon her that her perception was faulty. And so fixing the top layer so that it looks good is mere cosmetic. It doesn't help the deeper problems. Doctoring the second layer in the relationships with band-aids isn't going to improve the cake at all. Only when the foundation layers are uncovered and repaired will the cake be at all appealing. And so Beryl's story has a happy ending. She cooled down after a day or two, decided that if the doctor could pull that out of the air, he might offer something. And she returned, as does every patient seeking hospital treatment. She underwent a complete physical to rule out possible medical causes for any of her problems. She entered the hospital as much for privacy as for cure and worked diligently with us. We pieced together her sorry childhood, every bit of it, and a disastrous relationship. We examined the whats and the whys, and over the weeks she dealt with each of them. She hurt terribly during the process, but she emerged whole. And so Beryl finally learned to relate to both men and women without having to marry the men and then be abused by them. And she said, I never realized happiness and peace came in the same package. I never knew how sick I was until I got well. And so Beryl's problem was rooted in the third layer of her cake. Now, we all don't have necessarily the finances to go to see psychologists and psychiatrists. And so you might then say, okay, we don't have to then go further in terms of what, but that's what has the church been there for all along? Before the increase of the professional help, and they have a role to play, they do. But I think there's something that the church has to offer in listening to the stories of pain that we've gone through, to pray for one another and to bring about that healing. And if necessary, to go and see the professional to also guide us along as well. Be mindful of the fact that it says here, it won't get better. it'll only get worse. Okay, let's leave it there. Klompie gesê vanaand, nee. Liz, is that okay? Okay. Any comments? Any thoughts, questions? Nope. Next week we'll go a bit deeper. Liz?
Thanks, Grant. I just want to ask when this book was written, because I noticed that there's no mention of social media. I mean, they talk about television and things, and I think social media is can be a huge problem in relationships at the moment. Yeah. So.
Thanks for that. Thank you. The first edition, if I recall, is 1985, so before the days of social media. And so when we talk about addiction, exactly that as well. So you can add that to the list of addictions as well in terms of that. I think what they do offer is a process of healing, which I think continues to be used today as well. So if you want to get a copy of the book, please, you're most welcome to do so. I don't know where you're going to find it in a bookstore, but they are available online in various sites as well. So love is a choice. So, no, there's only the workbook in the library. So yeah, I do have a copy, so you could get it after Easter. So yeah, let's pray. And so I offer this to us all this evening. You can't change the love flow of previous generations. But you can change the way things are now. And so God offers to replace our pain and emptiness with His love, expressed directly through His Spirit and indirectly through the new healthy support relationships He may open for our life. God will do everything for us that our parents either never or could not have done. God will give nurturance and guidance and protection and love. And so when God heals us of our pain and fills our love tank, then we'll be able to give to others the love they need from us. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Safe travels.